coil irons in the fire at any one time.
Okay, thank you.
This time I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone here this evening. We do have a agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider that agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
I would request, Your Honor, that the closed session item 36 be removed from the calendar, from the agenda. I'll address that in my comments.
Okay. So we would delete the closed session. Any other changes? Thank you, Dennis. And we'll operate under that agenda. Agenda item number 3 is consider the approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting that was held on August 7th, as well as the council work session that was held on August 15th. The council does have the minutes of both of those meetings. Are there any corrections to note?
Mr. Mayor, move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is crack filling on the runways, taxiways, and the apron areas of the Southwest Minnesota Regional Airport. We have 2 actions to consider. One is to consider the resolution authorizing the execution of the agreement with MnDOT Aeronautics, and then following that would be to consider the award of the proposal. So, Jason, do you have any detail you want to add?
Not too much. Just proposals were received on the 13th of August for the crack filling at the airport, like you mentioned. 2 proposals were received, with the low proposal coming from Camco Inc. of Dassel, Minnesota. Project costs will not exceed $40,000, with participation being 70% state, 30% local.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Questions? John?
Jason, is it kind of the expectation that we're just going to stop at 40,000, or is that going to cover all the cracks being filled?
We're going to stop at 40,000.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Get what you can and stop at that point.
Correct.
Okay.
But there's been an evaluation that should be adequate, right?
It'll do some crack filling. There can always use more, but that'll be a good amount. Yes. Yeah.
Get the worst of them anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the first resolution, that being the authorize the agreement with MnDOT.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then the second action would be the recommendation for the award to Camco of Dassel, Minnesota, in the amount not to exceed $40,000.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is the bike trail reconstruction project at Legion Field Park. Consider the award of the proposal. Jason?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think Preston Stensrud with the Parks Department is here as well to present on this item.
Thank you. Preston Stensrud from the Parks Department.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Proposals for this project, as well as the Patriot Park project, which is the next agenda item, were received last week. All 4 proposals were from the same contractors for each one. There is $75,000 included in the park's budget for bike trail maintenance for 2018. We would recommend approval of this to Hiskin Construction in the amount of $36,988. And then we'd use the remaining funds for other overlaying of trails. We didn't move forward with that until we knew this one was going to be. So we just want to make sure there wasn't confusion that we had $75,000 budgeted for this project, but that was just for bike trail maintenance in general. So we'd recommend approval of this, and then we'll move forward with doing some other bike trail repairs with the remaining funds, not to exceed $75,000.
So Preston, for the audience and viewers, you may want to take a minute and explain that this is really part of the tennis court reconstruction project and designed to not only do the trail connection there, but also take care of some of the drainage area that comes off of the highway.
Yep. Currently, it's probably kind of hard to tell in the aerial, but from the curb line along Highway 19 west, I would say there's probably 16 feet from curb to the fence line of the tennis court. That's all gravel. You can actually see the whole back of the face of the curb. That's how much is washed out of there over the, I don't know, 20 plus years, I don't know. And all that ends up down on the tennis court. We sweep it off continuously after a hard rain. With this project, we'll take out that 4 or 5 foot of bituminous that's there now. The new path will be 8 feet wide concrete, and then there'll be drainage tile with a couple inlets and rock all along the fence. And from the remaining distance of the bike trail up to the curb will be all filled in with black dirt and seeded. So this will also go past the entrance to the parks and the pool and connect to 4th Street there, but that'll only be 5 foot wide. So there's kind of a rough stretch in there of pavement. So that'll include all this, and then make a connection into the west end of the tennis court. And then the future plan for next year would be to connect onto the bridge going over the Redwood River on 19 and go down to Legion Field Shelter and up to the parking lot. So.
Okay. Thank you, Preston. Questions?
I have a question. How come we're choosing concrete over asphalt? Doesn't asphalt come significantly cheaper?
I don't know exact cost-wise, but I think in this area it'd be awfully hard to get in there with a paver along the fence. And then to get your slope and drainage the right way, I think is going to be easier with concrete, and longevity for whenever you do have to do like a mill and overlay. There again, you're going to be in kind of tight quarters.
To add on to what Preston's saying, it is easier to meet ADA standards with sidewalk and trail when it's concrete. It's more rigid, it keeps its shape, and we don't end up with any discontinuities and adverse slopes where we don't want them. Not that it can't be done with bituminous, not that we don't have tons of bituminous trail, we just chose concrete in this application.
Well, I know you say you keep it level. I have a sidewalk that was replaced in front of my neighborhood 15 years ago that we got 2-inch lifts.
Sure.
So now that's more expensive also to maintain and fix when you come to do ADA. I just think in the long run, and I know your department was just saying, we need to start looking at areas to bring costs down. Bituminous is cheaper all around to lay this out, especially when you're doing 8 feet wide. And longevity, the bike path that was put in 1975 was replaced in, 2010? So, that, and I'm thinking of the one that ran past Waller Deemer School, past the hospital. That was in for over 35 years before we did any maintenance to it, and that was asphalt.
Correct. It wasn't both were in extremely poor shape, but they were still present. Yeah.
So I just think we're spending extra money on concrete that we don't have to. Those sidewalks are going to lift and raise and move as just as much as asphalt.
We can always start bidding alternates and start doing more of that work, but it's extremely time consuming, and we kind of choose to cut our losses sometimes and just choose a material. But if it's the wish of the council going forward, we can start trying to do more alternates.
I think when you're doing a sidewalk 8 feet wide, it is worth it, because 8 feet wide is easy for them to get their paving equipment in. If it's 4 feet wide, yes, I get it. 8 foot wide is not that uncommon to run through a paving equipment. So.
Other questions? If not, you have the recommendation. I would entertain a motion.
I'll move recommending the project.
Motion by John. Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to that motion?
I guess I better second that.
Seconded by David. Now discussion on the motion.
I like the idea of Councilmember Lazinski's idea of making it bituminous. I think that that's something that we need to look at, and I'd like to see a bid come back with the bituminous put out as opposed to just going forward with concrete. I think saving money is a good idea, and bike trails are, I think that you'll see heaving with concrete a lot quicker than you will with heaving with bituminous, especially if the bituminous is put down right. It's a little more flexible.
Other discussion on the motion?
I guess I would think the other way, that the asphalt would, I've seen more of, you look at like in the park, Independence Park, you see a lot of weeds coming through, irregularities that come from that, and trying to patch. The ADA compliance, I think, weighs more so for me in this one. And, you look at longevity, I think cement is.
And that may
good.
be, but I'd
Yeah.
need to see the data,
Yeah.
the projections.
I think the other consideration, and certainly Preston or Jason would be better off to speak to this, but it is a unique area that has had problems because of that
Water.
elevation difference, all the water coming off of the road and coming down. It is bituminous now, and it's been a problem, so this is correcting that problem. So, other discussion on the motion?
The only discussion I have is they all move. I don't care if it's asphalt or concrete. Asphalt is cheaper to put in and cheaper to maintain. It will move. It's concrete in Minnesota. It's going to move.
I think at a later date, if you'd like, we can have a conversation with the council about different materials and different maintenance costs and lifespan costs and those types of things, if you'd like more information at some point.
And the other part about lifting, there isn't trees in this area. So unlike a residential lot where sometimes we run into issues with it coming up because of the tree roots.
How long would it take, Jason, and Preston to get a bid back for both of them and get that data?
If we want this work,
Hamper things significantly?
yes. If we want this work to get done this year yet, we're running short on time. And contractor schedules are already busy, but we're trying to get this completed as quickly as possible,
When are you looking at a start date?
as soon as they can.
Because I know they say after September 15th, if you throw salt on new concrete, you'll ruin it anyway. So I don't think it's that terrible to wait a year, because we'd hate to put this concrete down on since October 1st. That's next to a state highway that's going to get a ton of salt on it, and thus that causes the top of your concrete to come off. So to wait and do it and get comparative bids and look at it that way, that is not a terrible idea, because we'd also hate to see this done in October, get salt on that November 1st, and our top comes off this concrete. And then it's happened on, it happened in 4th Street, it happened down Main Street. So concrete needs 30 days to cure.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on the motion. The motion is to award the project. And that motion does pass. Agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6 is the Patriot Park Bike Trail Construction Project. Once again, Preston.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This project is in the CIP and has been for a couple years. It would tie the southwest corner property line of Patriot Park. I can't think of the circle that is back there where that housing development starts, but it'd be the connection through there, coming through kind of at an angle towards the ball field at Patriot Park and over towards the playground. Would go by where our future shelter house bathroom proposed location would be, and then down to the connection on the bike trail along Windstar Street. 60,000 was budgeted. We're basically right at our budgeted amount, $26 over.
Okay, thank you. Preston, questions?
Are those two numbers right, D&G and Hillston? I mean, did they actually come in identical?
According to their proposals,
Okay,
yes.
I just,
Yeah, we thought the same. So.
and I would have the same thoughts here. This, again, asphalt, you are virtually at budget, or the other ones are lower, but I'll just use the same argument. We should look at asphalt, especially running through the park.
Other questions?
Although this one won't have salt.
It will not have salt. You guys don't salt the sidewalks in the park.
I'll move approval of the low bid as presented.
Motion by David.
Second.
Seconded by John. Discussion?
I like the idea, again, getting both bids and seeing, and actually seeing the data of asphalt versus concrete and maintenance. I think that's because if you make the concrete deep enough, you probably have an advantage. But,
We feel good about the longevity of concrete
right.
and the
But it's going
lifespan
to crack
cost.
at some point in time, and then it's going to lift and heave. And when you look at lifting and heaving, is it cheaper to lift out that section that's broken and heaved out and replace it, or is it cheaper to patch
Yeah, and
asphalt? I don't know. I'd like to see that. And I think that waiting until next spring is probably not a bad idea.
from an engineering department standpoint, in these small parks projects, we'd like to not bid alternates and put in all the extra effort and wasted energy and cost of our staff, limited staff, to do these things. We'd like to sort of make a decision and go with it, but I can understand the greater conversation of wanting to talk about concrete versus asphalt and what that means, and maybe we can set up a time to do that at a later date with the council.
Very good. Preston, maybe Sharon can put up the drawing or the map. So I think for the audience, it would be good to, right now there's the sidewalk that ends in that right behind the subdivision, and it ends abruptly, and so there's no connection right now. So there will be in this.
Do you know that road off the top of your head? Okay.
It comes off of Cadillac.
Car Estates would be, there's a circle right up here with like 3 houses, and then you go down kind of towards the pond would be way down here in Thunderbird Road. The sidewalk is connected out to the road now, and then this ends right at our city, the property line of the park. So that would connect it all the way down through down to the stars.
Yep, it comes off of Cadillac near Viper Circle.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Preston. Any other discussion on the motion?
I just think as we look at these, and I know Jason's a lot of work, but as we talk budget, we need to start looking at that. I look at other communities and their asphalt. Hutchinson runs theirs as asphalt. The bike trail at Camden is asphalt. So we need to start looking, and this is a good example of what's going on. Through the park would be a good one that would be a good cost savings if it was asphalt.
Most state bike trails are asphalt.
Or asphalt.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And that motion does pass. Agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 7 is asphalt crushing. Consider the award of proposal. Jason Anderson, Assistant City Engineer.
Yep. Proposals were received on August 20th. We have one proposal from Rogie Excavating. I believe the tabulation in your packet says $3.85 per pound, but that's actually per ton. And the 2018 budget includes $47,000 for this work, and we will not exceed that amount.
Okay. Questions for Jason? This is for the pile of waste behind the street department.
Right.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion?
Why did we only get one bid?
That's a good question. I don't have a conclusive answer for you, but we feel good about the bid that we received.
And is there a plan for the reuse of the crushed material?
Yeah, our street department uses it all over town. We recycle it and reuse it in alleys or in other sorts of areas, so other minor work.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 8. Agenda item number 8 is crack filling on Channel Parkway. We have a proposal to consider. Once again, Jason.
Thank you. We received proposals for crack filling on Channel Parkway. Also on August 20th, the low proposal is from Camco, which was also the low proposal at the airport. The 2018 budget includes $31,000 for this work and will once again not exceed that amount.
Questions?
There's not something they miss that they're so much cheaper,
No.
is there?
No, we, not that we're aware. We just, Camco must have been ready to come in and work, so.
That's fine with me.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Second moved. Oh,
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 9. Agenda item number 9 is the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda this evening. They include approve the Springstead Post issuance contract updates, consider the approval of a tobacco license for Kualu Kwai, consider the application for an exempt permit for Prairie Home Hospice Incorporated, consider the application for exempt permit for Pheasants Forever, Lyon County Chapter 6, consider the authorization to declare vehicles as surplus property for the police department, consider the authorization to declare a duty weapon as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department, consider the joint powers agreements with Brown Lincoln Redwood Renville Drug Task Force and Task Force Emergency Response Unit, consider the service agreement between SMSU and Studio One TV, consider the vacation of the easement with Broadmoor Valley First Edition, and received a petition for the vacation of the utility easement and call for a public hearing. Consider the amendment for a temporary seasonal employee wage schedule, declare equipment surplus property from the Parks Department, and finally consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
14 and 19.
Any other item? If not, is there a motion for the remaining items on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Motion by Steve, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll now consider what the agenda item number 19 or 20, which was agenda item number 14. Jim?
My question is you know, I thank Jody Gladys for her service, but he wants to purchase his weapon, his duty weapon for $300 some, and we have to replace it for $500 and some. To me, you know, as a visit taxpayers, they say $200 here, $200 there. It all adds up. I guess my feeling is guns don't wear out, and that weapon can be reissued to another officer when he starts. That it's just, I don't want to say it's throwing away taxpayers' dollars, but it's $200 that we don't have to spend.
Rob?
Well, it's two things. The guns don't wear out as such. They do get loose in that. The sight is a luminous sight, and those do fade after a number of years, but it's really in more of a sentimental purpose. It's a recognition of the years of service for the officer, and it's the handgun that the officer ended up his career carrying and carried for various lengths of time. It's something we've been doing now for a number of years, and there is a cost between the trade-in value and the purchase of a new one, but again, we don't do a lot when someone's gotten their salary and they get a pension when they leave, but you know, as far as something that they really get from their career, from the city, and that for us for quite a number of years, it's been the opportunity to purchase the gun, and not everyone has, but many do, and there is a difference between the two. But
so just as a side note, Kyle, I think we moved the wrong agenda item.
That was 15, but I know what you're talking about. So,
well, I meant 15. Sorry. And I get, you know, this is where I look at Steve when he left the military. My father, who served 25 years in the military, they don't get the option to purchase their weapons. It's one of those that we have to be conscious of what the taxpayers pay for this. And you're correct, he doesn't get much, but he does get a pension. when a lot of people retire, they don't even get pensions.
Right.
And he did get recognition, and Jody did a great job. He was a good officer. He had a get together. I just look at the taxpayers who say, you know what, $200 here, $200 there. This all adds up. And, you know, what would happen if Jody says, well, I'll buy the police department a new gun so I can have my old service gun? Let him carry the $200 instead of the taxpayers.
We can pose that to them. It's just, we have, again, and there is, like I said, some degradation of the gun. It's not substantial, you know, it's mechanical. The sight is there, so, I don't know, maybe split the difference or something. I don't know, it's your decision, and we will.
It's just, it's just, to me, I got to look out. We were voted on look out for the taxpayers, and like I said, a lot of them are just, they're sick of the $200 here or there.
Mr. Mayor, I actually had that same question, and I actually called a local firearms dealer to see what the value of that gun would be, and it's, I mean, if we sell it to them, that's about what it's worth. So, you know, but I agree with you, the guns never wear out, and you could go from officer to officer to officer, so something to think about.
Yeah, we got the pricing from two different dealers, and they gave
right
us,
yeah. But you're right, the luminary,
that fades.
That fades
actually
after
has
about
to
10
be
years,
replaced.
and that's got to be replaced.
Okay, other questions on this item, which is, I think we had the wrong one up there, but
I'll make a motion to approve the sale or the declaring a surplus of the property. In this case, the handgun. Should have been item 15.
motion by John, is there a second to that motion? For the sake of discussion, I will second that motion. Discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, with this one, it's still on the vehicles as opposed to the things, so should we do a voice vote?
Kyle? Yeah, let's do that. Voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Kyle, do you have the vote? The motion does pass 3-2. Then we'll move to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
My notes say that should be agenda item number 21, the part-time employee wage schedule. Jim?
The only question I have on this is as we do these after-school programs, why is the Y not doing these? And the reason I ask that is as we look at this, the Y can get grants for after-school programs. They can get fairly large grants for after-school programs if they're sponsored through the Y. My only question is why is this running through the City of Marshall, not the YMCA, through the YUSA grants and so on and so forth?
So a call on Scott Vandermillen, Community Services Director, and Community Education does fall under that. So,
one of the justifications of receiving funding from the state for community education is that we do run a after-school program.
Okay, we do receive funding from the state for this.
We do.
Okay, that
School district's the fiscal agent for it, but
and that's a question. You answered my question. I looked at other cities where they run them through their YMCA's, which they get grants. We're getting funding from the city, state for it. That answers my question.
okay.
That wasn't in our. Thank you, Scott.
So I would entertain a motion on the amendment.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 22. Agenda item number 22 was added to the agenda today. This is a Minnesota Highway 68 project. This is an informational presentation. We have two representatives from Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'll ask them to introduce themselves and talk about the upcoming project on Highway 68.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having us here. I am Chris Nienaber with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. This is Mark Klima with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Got a short little informative presentation about the upcoming project, and we have some maps that kind of show the general project area that Mark is going to pass out. All right, so I'll just jump right in. The main purpose of this project is to widen the shoulders and replace some box culverts. The shoulder widening goes from the city of Minneota to Marshall, and no work will be done in the city of Ghent. And 5 box culverts will be replaced, and they are on the map shown as circles. There's 2 near the city of Porter, 1 near the city of Taunton, 1 between the cities of Ghent and Minneota, and 1 box culvert replacement just south of Ghent on Trunk Highway 68. The total length of the shoulder widening is approximately 11 miles. Due to the extensive culvert and drainage work in this project, it will require a detour. Construction is expected to begin in the spring of 2021 and to be completed near to the end of the construction season. Right-of-way acquisition is anticipated with this project, particularly on the south side of Trunk Highway 68. Although the final amounts needed, this project is still very preliminary, but there will very likely be right-of-way acquisition needed because of the shoulder widening. Currently, the shoulders along this corridor are about 4 feet wide. This project would increase the usable shoulder to about 8 feet total, 9.5, roughly. Yeah. So, and with this corridor being a pretty major commuter route, connecting like Taunton, Minneota, Ghent to Marshall, and the shoulders right now are not adequately wide enough. It's primarily a safety improvement along the corridor. So that's primary.
Will the shoulders be paved?
The 4 feet that's there will remain, but the additional widening will be gravel.
Mm-hmm.
Any thought of putting that into paving? The
Not
reason I think is a safety issue. There's a lot of people out here that bike.
right.
You can't bike on 68 safely
Okay.
because you've got 4 foot.
And there's rumble strip.
And there's rumble strips.
Right.
Yep.
As far as vehicle safety, there's really not a lot of additional benefit to having a bituminous paved shoulder versus a gravel shoulder.
Define vehicle.
Well, I meant, motorized vehicle, a car, a semi, so on and so forth.
Motorcycle.
Well,
You're on a
additional-
motorcycle and you've got to hit the shoulder.
Right. No, you make a point, yeah.
Yeah.
Motorcycles are not generally more than 10% of the vehicle,
The majority, or do you do it for the minority? I mean, safety should be, if you're thinking safety, you should put the pedestrian as the foremost.
Our data shows that the main safety benefit from shoulder widening is having an actual shoulder there. That's my short answer. Is there additional benefit to having the entire shoulder paved? Certainly.
Okay. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So, I'll let you continue with your presentation. I think I interrupted you. So.
No. That was pretty much about all the pertinent information for this project. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, we'll open it up then for questions. I would say, as you said, this is a major commuter route. In the morning, it's very busy traffic coming into town with employees that are working in Marshall, but are living in places like Porter or Taunton or Lincoln County or Ghent or Minneota. And in the evening, it's very busy too. So, and there has been tragic accidents on here, so it's a much-needed project. So I'm glad to see MnDOT also has this on their project schedule. Other questions or points? John?
It's just a couple of things. This is 2 years out on construction. Are you really expecting the entire construction season to finish this, or are you just allowing yourself the entire season to get through the entire process? I mean, realistically, is it going to be detoured for 4 months, 3 months?
I would plan on the entire season. That is to say, again, the beginning of May until Labor Day or thereafter. So it's shoulder widening, so the shoulders are coming out, and then the inslopes are going to get flattened too, which is another safety benefit. That's quite a bit of dirt to move. As Chris said, there's 5 box culverts, but there's also between 30 and 40 regular round culverts that are going to get lined, extended. Of those 30 to 40, I think there's 12 or 16 that are going to get completely replaced. So there's a number of trenches. There's private utilities that have to be relocated.
So it's an extensive
job. So
when
all those things, if it's just the widening, that's kind of one or two steps. But if you do you got to get the utilities out of the way, then you got to replace the culverts, then you got to move the ditches, then you got to. Okay, so anytime you add more steps, the overall season kind of stretches out. So I would just say it's safe to say, as far as local businesses, trucking, ag, and so forth, that it's just best to plan on the full season.
And as far as the detour, is that going to be? I know there's an asphalt road from Minneota over to 59 or something.
Correct.
Or is it going to be on gravel roads?
Down to 19. There are a few obvious candidates out there. It's just a little premature to talk about what it might or might not be at this point. There's been some discussion too of, would you phase it? Would you do Minneota to Ghent and then Ghent into Channel Parkway? Is it possible? Sure. It's just a little too soon. Once we have our design done, then we know, exactly how many culverts, exactly what they're going to look like, and our staff that handles that can make a good call as to the, how.
Right now, you're in that phase of just doing the design work then.
Yeah. Technically, it's called preliminary design.
Okay.
Final design, detailed design, where we draw actual blueprints, plans that go out for bid. That'll begin probably right after Christmas. Mm-hmm. We'll be having more discussion after that.
Right.
Mayor, question. David. Just to follow on the discussion about the detours, here's what I'm hoping you don't have to do. That is one big monster detour from Marshall all the way up here up to Porter. I mean, you're not contemplating that, I hope.
We're not really contemplating anything right now. So if that is we can note that as that's a concern.
I mean, I don't think anybody would want that or be well served by it. What you said about staging got my interest. If there are ways, for example, to do a Marshall, Minneota, the two sides of a triangle detour, and then as needed a shorter detour to accommodate these, I hope you're able to consider those options.
We certainly can.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I assume you're making similar presentations to Ghent and Minneota.
Yes, correct. We'll be presenting to Lyon County Board as well on September 11th. September 11th and 12th, we're going to give a presentation at the city of Minneota and the city of Ghent. And then on the 13th of September, we're having an open house for basically the general public. Anybody within 1 mile of the highway, along with anybody with these smaller city zip codes, are going to get notified for that. We're also going to have a special presentation right before that open house for anybody who owns land along the highway between Minneota and Marshall, and then the 3 box culverts further west of there. Yeah, and that's just to discuss possible acquisition and grading easements and so on and so forth.
And the Taunton and Porter culvert extensions, is that in anticipation of the next project of widening the shoulders farther to the northwest?
Yes and no. Obviously, there is on the radar the widening and culvert replacement from Minneota all the way to Canby. I think that's booked for later on, like 2027, 28, somewhere in there. Yep. Basically, those 3 culverts, we're worried they just can't hang on that long. That's the short answer.
Mark, where's that open house going to be?
In Minneota at the, is it the, I can't quite remember. It's where they have their city hall meetings, most city hall community centers. So, yeah. Those mailings should be going out end of this week.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Agenda item number 23. Agenda item number 3, a Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities 2017 City Visit and Legislative Update in 2018. With us tonight is Marty Seifert, who is well known to this council, but in his capacity here this evening, he's representing the Coalition in Greater Minnesota Cities. Marty?
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a packet that each of you should have that looks like this, that's chock full of information. I'm just going to try to abbreviate this the best I can, and I'm going to go based off this little chart. As many of you know, Flaherty Hood represents the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, has since its inception, and that's who I'm employed by. And I tend to give the reports out in western Minnesota. I don't have to pay mileage and whatnot to people in the Twin Cities, so I do about 18 to 20 visits in western Minnesota, including a mile from my house here, so that's handy. We take direction from the Board of Directors on our agenda, which is usually set at the fall conference, which will be coming up in Alexandria in November. There's a little note in here if you are interested in attending that. We do appreciate David Struck's work in our transportation area and on the board. He make note that he did receive an award from the organization earlier this month, or back in July. Real quickly, local government aid, we have been trying to get back to our 2002 overall levels, and there's a chart I customized for Marshall in here that looks like this. It should be the second or third handout in there. This shows what local government aid from the state of Minnesota was back in 2002, and I think some of you know we had some pretty massive budget deficits during that time after 9/11, and so there was a large reduction to the local government aid program, and it's kind of been working its way back. And you can look at Marshall specifically on the bottom part of the chart, where you can see that Marshall itself is not quite back to where it was in 2002, but with our LGA bill from last year, if you turn it over, we would just be a tad over where we were in 2002 because of some formula changes. The legislature and the governor this year, because it was more of a bonding year, didn't view local government aid. They view local government aid as an expenditure, which it is. It's not a tax reduction in their mind. It's not scored that way from the Department of Revenue. So they looked at not increasing local government aid. It was not in the House or Senate bills. Now, interestingly enough, that's carried in the tax bill. The tax bill was vetoed, so had we gotten local government aid in the bill, it wouldn't have become law anyway. We did also have an update to the formula, largely that benefits the smaller cities in rural Minnesota that have been kind of falling behind on their need factor, and we just put a little information item regarding that. I think a lot of you know these smaller cities that just don't have the tax capacities of the Marshalls and the Mankato's of the world are struggling quite a bit. But we are going to bring both of those bills back next year when it is a budget year and fight very aggressively to get that $30 million, assuming the Board of Directors wants us to take that route, which I think they will at our November meeting. Real quickly, the next box was the Public Facilities Authority. This probably had more of a direct impact on Marshall than local government aid because we have this major water project going on in Marshall right now. And Brad Ruse, I think, will give you an overview at some point, but I believe Marshall was number 5 on the PFA list. This is out of dozens of projects around the state. We should qualify for millions of dollars. They are going through the formulas right now, but the way I calculated it, if we were to get a bonding bill of at least $100 million in the water area, Marshall would qualify for one of the more maximum grants. I think most of you know that for every $1 million Marshall gets, that's like 70 some dollars for every man, woman, and child in town. Obviously with water, you have your big users like ADM and Schwann's and so forth, but at the end of the day, the work that we did on the water program is going to have a major impact on Marshall in trying to keep your water bills down. You can see across there that we requested $167 million. The Senate had 120, the House had 120, and at the end of the day, we end up with $123 million, which we thought, I mean, you're on an elected body, you know not everybody gets everything that they want. We felt $123 million was a pretty good number for the water projects, and most of those go to rural Minnesota. The next one was a supplemental grant program. That was a new idea that came up, was not included in the final bill. It was in the House bill until the Ways and Means Committee, and they set it aside for further study to see how it would work in the future. We also had a permit review that was in the bill that got line item vetoed. That was in the final bill for cash for $1 million. There's a group called MESRB that does permit reviews and catches mistakes that the Pollution Control Agency makes from time to time. One major example is in Owatonna. They caught a mathematical error where they were going to require Owatonna to do a $15 million upgrade that MESRB found was unnecessary. We believe it's good to check these permits. PCA opposed the proposal and it did not go through.
probably the other biggest, I think, victory we had this year was the Corridors of Commerce program. This connects the major thoroughfares around rural Minnesota. This program is fairly new. It started about 5 or 6 years ago. Our firm and the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities kind of came up with this idea to connect the major thoroughfares like your Highway 23, Highway 14. The bonding bill carried $400 million in trunk highway bonds. We actually had a goal of $200 million, but I think some of you remember the original awards that came out in May were almost all in the metro area. They were within a 40-mile radius of the Twin Stadium. We helped create a major backlash. No offense to our friends from the DOT. I think they left now, but the DOT got a lot of pressure from our firm, from the legislature, to make up for what we believed was a mistake in awarding all of those dollars to the metro area. So what the legislature did is they appropriated $400 million. We helped come up with a formula. And just to give you a rough idea, $160 million of it will go to finish the 4-laning between Owatonna and Dodge Center. So if you drive, for example, right now, you hit Nicollet on the other side of New Ulm. The goal now will be, and the project will be, to finish and have a seamless 4-lane. If you need to go to the Mayo Clinic for some major stuff, or you got a convention in Rochester, or a sporting event, whatever it is, you should be able to drive seamlessly on a 4-lane road now from Nicollet to Rochester once this appropriation is complete. The second biggest chunk, and I want to give a shout out to David Sturrock and his group for working with us on this, is Highway 23 will get the second biggest amount of money. They will get up to $105 million of that appropriation, and that will 4-lane New London to Paynesville and Paynesville to Richmond. So their goal once again is to try to have that seamless 4-lane and do it in segments. I mean, all of you know in transportation, that's one area where you can do one-time money, get a chunk of road done, and then when money comes along, you get another chunk of road done, and you just kind of keep on making that work. We obviously have to work with the DOT on what's the plan for south of Wilmer. Are we planning on 4-laning this, or are you just going to put passing lanes in? But right now, their plan is to get the Paynesville to New London, Paynesville to Richmond piece done. The rest of it will largely go to Highway 252 to freeway that. So that's kind of the Corridors of Commerce plan. City streets, we focus on trying to get some money from appropriations in the city street program. We focus more so on the cities under 5,000 because they get no money from the gas tax. Cities of 5,000 and larger, which Marshall qualifies for, gets 9% of the gas tax dollar, comes back to Marshall, Redwood Falls, New Ulm, Mankato. Minneota, Granite Falls, Windham, Pipestone, Laverne gets 0. And that's a constitutional formula. That's not something the legislature can change willy-nilly. They did put $8.5 million in the budget for cities under 5,000. The governor vetoed the budget bill, so there was no money for that. Back page just has a little bit of information in regard to some other things. Constitutional amendment to dedicate general fund to transportation did not pass because it didn't come up for a Senate vote. The coalition generally views that as an erosion of the general fund, and it jeopardizes things like LGA, so they tend to oppose things like that. BDPI is a program we've used in Marshall for job retention and creation. There was $5 million in the bonding bill. We tend to be the only group that really lobbies for that. And then child care, we kind of came up with nothing in the child care area. Governor vetoed the budget bill. We had a $750,000 in the supplemental grant program for Greater Minnesota Child Care grants. We're going to make a major run at that next year. That is not just about money. That is a big regulatory problem. They're doing a study down in Rock County right now about regulations in Minnesota, regulations next door in Minnehaha and Lincoln counties, and trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Why are in-home daycare providers essentially being harassed out of business? And so we're going to try to bring some both policy ideas forward and some money ideas forward. It's not just one or the other when it comes to that. Otherwise, there's just one handout on wastewater accomplishments that you can read on your own. That's on front and back side. Our conference will be in Alexandria November 15th and 16th, so if you're interested in that, feel free to chime in and send some folks to that conference. And I'll just stand for questions that you might have.
So Marty, back to the PFA funding, that was in the bonding bill of 123. Has that been determined, the source of that? There's discussion about the funding source, that a portion of that would come through LCMR, and so
Yep.
it's the coalition and your firm trying to get resolution on that.
Yeah, we struggled to try to figure out how much should be out of the bonding bill. We prefer all of it to come out of the bonding bill. The LCCMR bill has a chunk of money, mainly cities under 5,000, that they're going to be funding a lot of LCCMR projects. The bonding bill funded a big chunk of them that are outside of that box as well, and there's money left over from last year that's going to carry over. So the PFA is actually kind of blending some of this money for both loans and grants for cities over and under 5,000. Our druthers would be the bonding bill under GO bonds, but the legislature, of course, views this as a clean water issue, which I think most of us do. LCCMR is supposed to be for clean water, and so they did a blending this year of both streams of revenue, and as long as it doesn't get out of control, we're okay with it, but we don't want like the entire LCCMR bill, because we have other things the coalition likes, trails and so forth out of the LCCMR, so we're trying to find a gentle balance.
Any other questions for Marty? Well, again, thank you, David, for your involvement on the coalition board. Thank you, Marty, for the work of the coalition that you and the coalition are doing. So
appreciate that.
Move then to agenda item number 24. Agenda item number 24, consider the resolution amending the liquor license and tobacco fees.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have a recommendation from Ways and Means to kind of reassess or reevaluate our liquor license fees all the way from our on-sale licenses to tobacco to investigation fees. So kind of put together a spreadsheet here of what we've been looking at these past several months. And on the 15th, that Ways and Means, that green line on the recommendation is what we have, or what Ways and Means is bringing forward tonight. I did want to bring to Council's attention two things. It was noted at the Ways and Means meeting that there is going to be a reduction of $1,200 to our on-sale liquor license holders, from $4,200 to $3,000 to kind of put us more in line with our comparable cities. That is going to be with our current applicants for going into 2019. That is going to be a $16,000 decrease that we will be collecting in permits, which is about 0.25% of a levy increase. So I just want to bring that to Council's attention. Those fees are also intended to cover the cost of issuance, inspection, and enforcement. These are just for on-sale license holders I'm talking about. Last year, my best guess, after confirming with my numbers and the Marshall Police Department's numbers, we spent roughly $57,000 on enforcement, inspection, and issuance last year. We collected $58,800, I believe, so we were pretty close. We will be collecting $42,000 this year with what we're proposing. That doesn't mean that those enforcement costs are going to be the same. They could be lower, they could be higher. Those are just our best guesses. One big incident could throw this all out. So those are the 2 points I just wanted to bring to Council's attention from Ways and Means. I'll take any questions.
Any comments from the Ways and Means Committee?
Just comment on it that really the effort in this was to try to be at a level that is comparable to other cities in our usual comparison rate. Honestly, they are all over the board, but this did seem, this pretty much followed the average of what was out there, recognizing that yes, this is about a $16,000 reduction in revenue for the city.
Any questions for either the Ways and Means Committee or for Kyle?
My question, Kyle, or Ways and Means Committee, when we talk about costs of investigation, expand on that for me, because if the police officers are already there, their job is to enforce the laws. Mm-hmm. Aren't they already doing it? I mean, what's the charge unless somebody brings a concern?
So how I base their time, the enforcement cost per year, That was the average officer's salary plus benefits times timed work. So I confirmed with the police department that they're going to send at least 2 officers there. On average, they're going to be there for 2 to 3 hours from the time they get the call till the time they finish the paperwork on the incident. So that's how I got my $57,000.
For an on-site or on-sale issue.
Right, and that law, it's defined by state statute how we set that fee. There's not we can charge whatever we want for it, but that's the purpose of that fee. It's not for revenue purposes, it's to cover those costs.
In the past 5 years, what's been the average?
I did not go back and look at the past. I looked at just our 2017 numbers.
Say we did have the number of police calls per location in the data that Kyle compiled for the Ways and Means. I guess I don't have that here either, but
140 calls to those establishments.
Right. I think 140 to 142.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, any other questions? If not, you have the recommendation. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the new fee schedule.
Motion by Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Steve. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. And a motion does pass.
We do not have the reduction in revenue in the budget. We will strive towards making that up somehow with a reduction in expenditures elsewhere or use of reserves, and then backfill it in 2020 levy. That's why it states it's an increase, because we need to make it up, that lost revenue somehow, but we haven't done that yet. It's not, we didn't budget the decrease in revenue.
Well, and there's always some uncertainty on revenue. You know, there could be one more license, there could be one less license. Yes. So there's always that uncertainty. But I think, Steve, your point is that, you know, we build our budget on the primary sources to levy, and we don't build our budget on, you know, estimating the number of calls that perhaps would justify revenue.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay. So with that, let's move then to agenda item number 25. Agenda item number 25, consider the request of Michael and Lynn Van Patten for a conditional use permit to have a yoga studio in their home at 807 Silvervine Drive. This was considered by the Planning Commission. I believe unanimously they recommended approval. Jason, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I can just maybe start it off. Looks like we have Lynn Van Patten here to speak as well. This is a request for a conditional use permit at 807 Silvervine to run a yoga studio in the basement of the home. The applicant stated that each class would have 4 participants and last about 60 to 90 minutes. 3 classes per week on a regular basis with occasional additional classes on the weekends. The driveway out front is large enough to accommodate 4 vehicles, which would accommodate all of the patrons to the studio. Public hearing was held at the Planning Commission meeting on August 8th, and the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval to the council. So.
Does the council have any questions about this?
The only question I have is and Jason and Illa, you can maybe address this, is as you go forward with this conditional use permit, it states it's going to be done in the basement. How is that ADA compliant?
So to clarify, this is a split level home.
It's a split level home, yes.
But still, how does that meet ADA compliance for businesses today?
That's a home occupation. There's no requirement to meet the ADA requirement.
There's no requirement for ADA.
Correct.
Thank you.
To the best of my knowledge.
The only thing, Ms. Van Patten, the conditional use permits go with the land.
Yes.
So that means that if the council elects or votes to authorize it and you guys move away, whoever comes in still has that conditional use permit.
That's my understanding. It
Yeah.
stays with the property.
Right, unless we, again, change it at some point in time. So, no, I just want to remind that to the council. Have you spoken with your neighbors on this? And
We've talked to some neighbors. A couple people just had questions about, what does it mean? What kind of traffic will be on the street? But as Jason mentioned, we have plenty of room in our driveway, and my plan is to instruct people that they have to park in the driveway to come to class. And if they don't, they'll have to go out and move their car.
And you had the public hearing?
We did.
Any other questions?
Going back to Steve's point, there is another condition, it's not a conditional use permit, there's another permit that can be offered for this business, so it's not a conditional use. I don't remember what it is, so we looked it up 2 years ago. So it does not go with the land. There is, and it's something you have to do some research on, Dennis, but it's a specific use permit, or there's something that can be done besides a conditional use permit.
I believe Jim is thinking of the home occupation permit. That piques my curiosity. Why didn't we pursue that option in this case?
No, Ilya, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain we need to make ordinance changes to allow for that. Is that true?
Jason, you'll have to speak up.
Ilya will come forward and speak to that.
Currently, the home occupation is a conditional permit. I think Jim was talking about interim use permit. That is a totally different thing. It allows the termination of the permit at some point of time, but currently the city of Marshall doesn't have interim use permit in the ordinance. But right now, the home occupation is a conditional use permit.
Well, I am thinking, and perhaps Jim is thinking of the permits that typically are given for 1 year on a trial basis and then renewed on 5 years after that. Does that model apply here?
Well, that's how it used to be, but that's how it is right now in the ordinance. But the conditional use permit indeed does not allow time limitations. It does stay with the.
I understand that, Ilya, but are you saying that we no longer have provision under our own rules about that?
We have to change the ordinance in order to make it compliant with the.
Well, we've been doing that for years, have we not, Dennis? What's
correct.
changed in the law that no longer allows us to do that?
I believe it's something, when Steve and I went to our thing, it came up that we were not compliant as a city with the law.
That's correct.
Right.
Plain and simple.
Right.
And I think at this point, not that I'm against your program, but I think we should pull back on this and implement an interim permit so there's conditional use. So when they sell the property or they close their business, the permit is gone. So we don't have these conditional use permits floating out there forever. I think we need to take a step back and correct that on our ordinance before we keep issuing these.
It's on my list to look at that specifically at the home occupation permits and see how it can be handled differently.
Correct, because otherwise we'll have these conditional use permits out there, and we have a lot of them out there, and I think we need to rein that in. And not that we want to do it with you, but at some point we have to do it, and I think this is a good place to start.
I mean, of course, the chance that someone else would be doing yoga studio in the same house.
You don't know what it could happen. Right. You don't know. It's out there forever.
Well, but let me play devil's advocate, okay? I'm for the business. I want the business. If somebody else comes in and wants to run a yoga studio, all more power to them. I mean, God forbid you guys move, but if you do move to a bigger city with a bigger house and have another yoga studio, that's great. If somebody comes in and wants to use your property, which is a residential property, for a yoga studio, because that's what we will make the conditional use permit. So in Ilya's argument, the likelihood of somebody moving into Marshall and filling a yoga studio, because the legislation of the conditional use permit will specifically be for a yoga studio.
Right, correct.
That would be really remote, Jim, but if they do come in, good for them. So be it.
And they would still need to be compliant with the conditions.
With the conditions, right. So I think that conditional use thinking is a good thing to go forward, but I'd be in favor of this.
John, you had a comment?
No.
Okay. That's it.
Was that a motion?
I would make the motion that we authorize a conditional use permit.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion on the motion.
The other discussion I have on this is as we move these businesses in the homes, we move them out of our downtown district. Downtown, those folks pay higher hookup fees to utilities. They pay higher property taxes. So doing a home business, which is fine. I mean, I'm all for it. Well, not really, but you take an advantage over those commercial businesses, and we want to keep our downtown viable. So we're moving somebody from downtown into a home.
My point would be that as a spouse of a person who tried to do that and was unable to because of costs in rental properties, far better to do it this way.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Motion passes. We wish you well in your business. David?
Mayor, would it be appropriate to have an inquiry of staff about developing some of that language Mr. Goodman suggested for our consideration in the near future?
Yeah, and I thought I heard Mr. Goodman say that this is on his radar. This is something he is looking at, but yeah, we'll have that
So I
discussion.
encourage you all to coordinate with each other fairly soon about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So agenda item number 26, consider the application for a temporary on-sale liquor license for the Sunrise Rotary for September 21st to 23rd at Red Baron Arena Club in Marshall Club Room. Any questions on this? Not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Steve, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
I will add that the recommendation does state SMSU, but it is Red Baron.
And that's the reason it was on the, not on the consent agenda. And motion passes. Agenda item number 27. Agenda item number 27, the Saratoga Street Reconstruction Project. The action here would be to consider the resolution declaring the cost to be assessed and ordering the preparation of the proposed assessment. And the second action would be the resolution calling for the hearing on the proposed assessment. So again, this is declaring the cost and then calling for the hearing. Dennis, anything you want to add to this?
No, sir.
Any questions?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by David for the resolution there declaring the cost to be assessed. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, and then the second action would be the resolution calling for the hearing on the proposed assessment. That would be held September 25th. Questions or a motion?
I'll move that resolution.
Motion by John, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by David. Discussion?
No discussion, but I think your office would then take care of the public notice that comes from the engineering department.
Correct. We'll be sending out notice 2 weeks prior to the public hearing, no later than 2 weeks.
Any other discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 28. Similar action, however, this is related to the Marguerite Avenue, South Bend Avenue reconstruction project. Once again, there's a resolution declaring the cost to be assessed, as well as the resolution for the hearing on the proposed assessment. I would entertain a motion on the resolution declaring the cost. Motion by Steve.
Seconded.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes, and then the second action would be the resolution calling for the hearing on the proposed assessment.
I'll move the resolution.
Motion by John, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. And then agenda item number 29. Again, similar actions, however, this is related to the Michigan Road, Superior Road reconstruction project. Now, ask for any questions or entertain a motion on the resolution for the cost to be assessed.
This assessment's been discussed with the owners, correct? If I remember correctly from our previous meetings, they're very aware of what's coming.
They're aware.
Just a comment that I will be abstaining on this one, both motions.
Any other input? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim, for the resolution declaring the cost to be assessed in preparation of the proposed assessment roll. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note the abstention. And second action, that would be the resolution calling for the hearing on the proposed assessment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note the abstention. Agenda item number 30. Agenda item number 30, Commission Board Liaison Reports. I have no report this evening. Steve?
No reports.
John?
MMU did meet earlier this afternoon and probably just wrapped up recently a couple of things that are going on. They received a report tonight doing a wage analysis, something that has not been done for the utility since 2004. And so they are making some changes to their structural setup for the steps, reducing the steps from 12 down to 10, and a few other changes on how people progress through those. So that the report was just received tonight, and they're now having that under discussion and advisement, and will not be voting on that until next month. A couple of other things that are on the agenda that I wasn't able to stick around to hear, but they are reaching a conclusion on their interaction for their automatic meter reading. There was an integration problem of trying to get all the systems to work. That appears to have been resolved, and so they are going to be picking up in September and start moving into that phase of installing some of the units and get the automatic meters installed in a number of areas to get through the prototype. I think they have all the integration problems resolved. So that's about it. EDA did not meet since the last meeting. So I don't think, right? No.
Okay, thank you, John. David?
PI&T committee met on August 13th, chiefly to review, it's an annual process we do to review road classifications that affects various types of state aid funding that different projects within the city can be eligible for. That's all.
And Jim?
I have no report.
Move then to agenda item number 31. Agenda item number 31, council member individual items. Steve?
Just a thanks to City Administrator Sharon Hansen. There was an issue brought up that I caught on Facebook actually and forwarded to Sharon, who talked to Jason, and they got it taken care of. So it's amazing what social media does as far as bringing things in. I wish that the public would actually come to the city staff first with their issues before putting it out on social media, but either here or there, it got the attention and we got it fixed.
Very good. Jim?
The only thing I have is, as we get into the budgets, and I know we talked about it earlier tonight, Jason, is as we look at this, and we've even chatted in your office about shrinking our streets to 34 feet because of maintenance costs and stuff. As we go forward, as we're looking at a property levy increase of between 6.5%, we need to keep that in mind as we look for it. I know it's a lot of extra work for your staff, and I appreciate all that extra work, because it saves the taxpayers money. That we may have to start looking at that, and maybe we'll switch the way we do stuff, because 6% levy increases is tough for me to pass on to the taxpayer citizens of Marshall. So I think that we need to start looking more at those other options and looking at what we can do to keep that down, yet providing the services that we can. There are other options out there, and sometimes it takes time to find those, but we as a city staff, we as a council, as a staff, we need to do that for our tax-paying citizens.
David?
One item, the project I believe I mentioned earlier, was spent some time over a few weeks visiting with the neighbors on South First Street and adjoining stretches that had the worst effects of the July 3rd storm. We had information at the wastewater office about reports of sewer backup, and there were a lot of gaps on that map, so it prompted the question, are there people we haven't heard from? And the answer was not very much. There were a couple of errors of what was recorded. It wasn't sewer backup, just stormwater, and one or two cases of minor sewer backup they did not know about, but the information they had fit very well. But I think it was useful to do the exercise to hear from some folks directly, and passing that information along to Bob Van Moore to help shape remediation steps we bring to deal with the sewer capacity over there.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. We'll move then to agenda item number 32. Is staff reports, and we'll note there's one action item here.
Correct. Mr. Mayor and Council, I do want to update on a few items, and it's been a really busy past month with lots of activity, so I'll keep this brief, and we'll get to the requests. But update, we did get a draft of a long-term debt study from Abdul Eichenmeyer, and we're doing a staff review. There's some follow-up questions that they had, and I know Carla and Annette need to get back to them with some additional information. As Carla has noted and the auditors have noted, we have many open construction funds and other funds. We've working towards consolidation, and that has added some complexity to the study. So likely we would do a work session on this particular study and presentation, so we can carefully look long range and how we want to reduce that long-term debt. Also, wanted to just highlight, we do have a budget work session on August 30th. Most of the presentation will be on our community request, but we'll also have some discussions on merit and Red Baron budgets, which would be outside the levy, as you are fully aware. So a heads up on that. And we still have a schedule of potentially adopting a preliminary levy on September 11th. And some of the projected tax levy increase proposal was based on rate of growth. And we did capture some additional TIF tax capacity in 2019, and so we're kind of adjusting for that in the levy increase, but we can explain more on September 11th and have that discussion at that point. I do want to also acknowledge the forwarding of information, whether it be a concern from a resident vocally or via Facebook. I always say this, when we hear concerns, it makes us better. And we're not always aware of what the issues might be, so I'm really appreciative of getting the feedback. I do want to add, on Facebook, we're not able to monitor all the postings that are out there. Some of you may be connected with these Facebook postings just through friendships. So it's not that we're ignoring the concerns out there on Facebook. We just can't read them all, or we're not connected to them. And then we have to be kind of aware of if we would ever respond on another Facebook posting, it's public data. And we typically don't respond on other person's Facebook postings. And then we also are going to try to respond to our own Facebook postings and within a reasonable time frame as well. We don't have Alex monitoring web postings, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, even though he has done a lot on response during certain situations, such as during the flooding event. So I do appreciate the the feedback and the concerns that are brought forth, so we're aware of them. And 2 items. I do want Kyle Box to come up and talk about how the primary elections went, and prior to that, I did put in a request for out-of-state travel. And my apologies for the delay in getting this to you earlier. This is something that just got finalized actually last Friday with a specific date confirmed on Monday. And because our email system was down early this morning for most of the day, I wasn't able to email this to you. But there has been a request by Schwann's because we've had a changeover in Convention Visitors Bureau coordinator, and we have a current contract with them to market Red Baron. They would like to kind of re-engage the city on the potential of Red Baron marketing. And what they would like to do is bring some staff. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, you're interested in attending this as well to Salina, Kansas, where they have an event center similar to Red Baron. I think it is larger, the community is larger, but they think there could be a lot of parallels between that event center and Red Baron, and just kind of an information sharing type trip, and also support from Schwann's on the value that they see in Red Baron. And so we're going to try to keep the cost to a minimum. We want to book it down there and book it on back is kind of our goal. So, but there will be cost of travel in terms of gas and mileage and so forth. So according to the personnel policy, City Council needs to approve out-of-state travel for staff.
Okay, so you have that request. Are there questions about that request first option? This will be driving. My role is to be in the driver, apparently. So.
Did you talk at all to Councilman Schaefer before you agreed to take a ride? No.
I did not have discussions with Councilman Schaefer, so.
Out of concern for safety, that's an almost 9-hour drive.
Yeah.
To book down and book back in one day, that's a lot.
I'm bringing a pillow. I don't know what the mayor's doing.
You know, I'd be okay to authorize a night over just for safety, because as we know, tired driving is as dangerous as drunken driving.
Yes.
I think the challenge is finding 2 days.
Yeah.
How many miles is it down there?
It is 499 miles.
One way.
One way.
You guys do this in one day.
Mile round trip, Meshuggah.
I think we money
Why
have
don't
to have
you
you guys
fly
rent the
it
car
out?
and pay you mileage too. Mileage is 50.
I think that's your intention.
Yeah, we are going to look into that.
I think we'd rent a nice, comfortable car if you're going one. I wouldn't ride, not to pick on your little pickup, but.
Did you ever get?
I make a motion to approve this.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by David to approve out-of-state travel for city staff. Discussion? I'm not included in this. This is
I don't believe
the only one
it's
that
for
has to be
elected
authorized
officials.
is city staff.
Right.
Yeah, like I said, I'm fine with it. Even if they stay overnight in a hotel, I'm okay with that.
Okay, other discussion on the motion?
Can I amend my motion? That we allow, if they get tired, that they can have a room for, I mean, if you do, you get tired, pull over, get a room. So I want to amend my motion that we do allow, if need be, a hotel room.
Agreed. D'accord.
Okay, so we clarified that motion. Okay. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote or voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
I don't mean to delay but I think it would be good to hear a report from City Clerk Box on how the primary election went with the new equipment and turnout and so forth.
All right. So yeah, we had a great, this is my first election. It was a great experience for me being in the city of Marshall. We had some new equipment. We had new poll pads that were checking in and registering new voters. and then a new ballot counter as well. All the equipment worked almost flawlessly. We had one delay at Ward 2 getting connected to the internet, but that was resolved by, I think, 5 or 10 after 7 in the morning. So throughout the day, we had just under 28% voter turnout in the city of Marshall. With, let's see, I have my numbers here, with 1,863 ballots that were cast. That includes the mail-in and absentee ballots for all 3 wards. And that was roughly a 30% increase from the last the last primary election from 2014, so 4 years ago. So it kind of gives me a good indication that we're going to see an increased turnout in November as well. So we're going to staff accordingly and prepare for that. So great feedback from the equipment. All the election judges loved using it. It just speeds up the process immensely, and from experienced judges in my eyes as well. So I can take any questions.
The only comment I want to make is I went and voted on the primary, and the equipment did work very well because somebody filled out their ballot wrong. He'll say nameless here, but maybe Jim. And they kicked it right back out so I could get a new ballot and do it correctly so it was counted. And I was rather impressed, by how it did that. It's, yo, you did it wrong. I didn't quite say that.
All 4 of the sheriff candidates? Wow.
That might have been something like I did, but yeah. So it did work very well when I voted. I was very impressed with it.
I should also add we canvassed the ballots, and I served on the canvassing committee on Friday, and again, that was reviewed, and we took one precinct from Marshall and did a review of that, and of course everything worked out perfectly. And then we took a mail-in township and another township that was in-person voting. So, John?
Just one comment that I'd make in regard to Ward 1. Everything worked fine. The only thing I would suggest is we put a little fold-out sign or something that says, park here, because people probably didn't realize that parking lot off on one side was reserved for, or was allowed to be used by somebody doing the voting.
It was supposed to be reserved for voting. Long story short, it got lost between us and SMSU's office. I think the gal that usually worked there is no longer working in that capacity, so it just got missed in the transition of people. So we did get it corrected about middle of the day to have, I think, staff and athletes were parking in there, and we did have them move out and available for
I did park voters there, and I didn't get a ticket, so I'm good.
Okay, yeah.
So. Well, thank you, Kyle.
I just want to add one thing. That's the election process administration. That's a really good partnership and support with Lyon County. E.J. Moorberg, who kind of helped facilitate the equipment purchases. That was really thought out, and I thought we worked really well together. The Lyon County website with the election results, and I'm sure Councilman Sturak has evaluated that, and the Secretary of State's. It's a pretty nice website too. So if you get a chance, come this November, please check that out too. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Jason?
I don't think I've got too much to talk about, but I would just mention that you probably noticed on your way here that Saratoga between C Street and Southview had some paint on it, which was a good sign. So all things are looking good towards opening that up before school starts, that section of Saratoga Street. So that's a positive. South Bend and Marguerite projects are just about wrapped up. We've got very minimal work remaining there. And Michigan Superior Reconstruct and Commerce Industrial Park are chugging along. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Jason? I would just echo what I believe you said. The Saratoga Street in particular seems to have gone extraordinarily rapidly and well, and the finished product looks, I think, very good.
Yeah, we believe our contractor is doing a really nice job.
I just wish they'd hurry up. It's getting hard to get from here to there anywhere.
You and everyone else in the community feels that way.
I was going to drive down. My wife said, you can't turn down Southview because Marguerite is blocking Southview now.
Yeah.
What?
It's really been affecting my bike rides at night, so.
My town is very nice. We don't have a lot of blockage.
Dennis?
Thank you, Mitchell. Two things. The unique opportunities, the apartment complex matter is set for closing Friday of this week. The last hurdle had been, one of the prerequisites for the developer was that they have a firm financing commitment. The First Dakota Bank out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota is financing that operation, and we are set for closing. Pretty much will take all of Friday morning. Right now there are 21 separate closing documents that have to be reviewed, approved, signed. And so that is set to happen Friday. And then what I had originally scheduled for a closed session tonight deals with the outstanding payment due to finalize it, as City Administrator Hanson had addressed. We have several outstanding road construction projects that have not been finalized out. One of them is the Saratoga Street Overpass project, a great project. The finished product looks good, but there's one final payment due to the contractor. Now, to begin this discussion, it's good because the project came in $100,000 under budget. And 10 of the 11 payments have been made, but the last outstanding issue, there were time overruns on the project, so there's potential for liquidated damages. It's been recommended that liquidated damages be assessed against the contractor. The contractor is not agreeing with that, and it's a dispute. What is the cost for the time delay? I was originally set to get some strategy from the council. Where do you want to go with this? However, after talking to the contractor, we are set to have some face-to-face discussions with the contractor, with some subcontractors, with the engineers in early October. So let's just let that whole process play out. And there's a $100,000 payment due. There's potentially $100,000 in liquidated damages. So there is some room to negotiate here. So, but it's a great project that, yeah, the original bid we're at $4.9 million, and the final cost at $4.8. So, great project. I think everybody agrees with that.
Any questions for Dennis? No, thank you. We'll move then to agenda item number 35, which is the information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 36 is off the agenda. So agenda item number 37, the upcoming meetings. And as noted earlier, the council will meet in work session this Thursday for budget. Agenda item number 38 then would be to consider adjourning. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Discussion? We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We're adjourned.